Talking about Mrs. Obama, when we went to the White House, and she had this amazing group of her female aides there to talk to the girls, and they gave this really powerful idea of when you're doing well, you reach behind, you put your hand out behind you and you pull the next people along, and it's not a competition. When one is winning, we're all winning.
Welcome to Talking Head, the podcast where school leaders share what actually works. I'm Ross, founder of Involve Education, and today I'm joined by Sarah Beagley, who leads Elizabeth Garrett Anderson School in Islington, a school that's achieved outstanding in every category despite serving one of London's most challenging communities. Her school famously hosted Michelle Obama, who called it a place that achieves without limits. Sarah's discovered something fascinating about what it really takes to help every student thrive, and her insights challenge conventional wisdom about inclusion and achievement. Let's dive in. Sarah, Elizabeth Garrett Anderson School has achieved something remarkable, outstanding across the board while serving one of the country's most disadvantaged communities. So the obvious question is, how did you do it?
That's a nice, easy question to start off with, Ross. How did we do it? Well, it was never our intention to set out to achieve outstanding Ofsteds. Our intention was always to create the most remarkable school that we could for the benefit of our students. And that has always been what we are in the business of doing. It's about having very clear values. Our aspiration and our ambition are really, really clear, and they have remained clear throughout those last 4 outstanding Ofsteds. And it is always, how do we ensure that every child is able to achieve without limits? Now, that's a very simplistic idea in itself, but actually it cuts down into every single thing that we do. Our approach to what we do is that we are in the business of creating young people who can be academically successful, but more than that, we have to provide the next generation with amazing young people and young women. We have to. So our job doesn't stop when the doors close, and it doesn't stop when they leave us. We are fully committed to making sure that this next generation go on to be remarkable leaders of their communities. So that's what's driven us. And it just so happens that Ofsted also have felt that what we're doing is remarkable. But we have never taken decisions based on what Ofsted, determined, because over those 4 Ofsteds, the framework has changed multiple times. It's been different, but we have just stayed true to what we believe a great and outstanding school should look like for the benefit of its young people, not for the benefit of the school.
And you talk about belonging as the foundation for achievement. And I guess I kind of want to ask, what does that mean in practice?
I think it's particularly important for a school like Elizabeth Garrett Anderson. So our young people are drawn. It's a global community. They are drawn from all over the world. Although they live within 1 mile radius of the school, it's an incredibly rich and diverse community, which is one of the reasons why I love it so much. 60% of the school are pupil premium, and that number is rising. And for these young people who have got multiple levels of potentially disadvantage, I don't always see it as disadvantage. I think it's really important that when we're talking about their backgrounds, that gives additionality. But in terms of the lives that they live, sometimes they are being asked to straddle multiple worlds in a day. Who am I at home? Who am I in the community? Who am I expected to be at school? Who am I being prepared for in the workplace? And I think it can be very confusing for a young person not to lose that sense of who they are. And so belonging is a fundamental pillar of what we do. I want every single student at EGA to know that they belong. And that is not fitting into what we consider to be correct. That is about understanding that this is a place where you are accepted for everything that you are. You are seen, you are heard, you are valued for you. Because if you don't feel like you belong, how can you thrive? How can you take risks? How can you really start to explore what you think? I mean, we live in a world which is so censored, don't we? We live in a world where everybody, particularly young people, are so scared of expressing views or speaking their mind, and it's an age when you should be really trying to test your thinking. And so this is a place where they are safe, they are held, they belong, and they get it wrong. And of course, we are there to pick them up and to hold them when they get it wrong in order for them to be better. So yeah, hugely important part of what we do.
Brilliant. And I believe, so Michelle Obama, I mean, that's certainly something I'm going to want to ask about, but she said that your school achieves without limits. And I'm intrigued to know what makes this possible, and what has the journey been like for you personally to get to a point where someone could say something as grand as that this is a school where children can achieve without limits?
So when I first came to the school, and that was 32 years ago now, there were certainly limits that were placed on young people, and there was a ceiling that had been placed on what the staff felt was possible at times. Not all of them, but some of the staff. They come from this background. This is their experience. This is their family. This is where they can be. It was really important, and this was the head before me, that the ceiling was taken, the lid was lifted. And we have done that multiple ways. We have lifted the lid on what is possible. And if you do lift the lid, it is unbelievable what happens. I mean, we went through a really quite remarkable piece of work on the curriculum, for instance. So at EGA, although we have a community which some people may look at and think, over the years, they've traditionally come into us below expected levels. We pushed them very hard academically. We had quite an interesting innovative curriculum model where students would be taking GCSEs in year 9. They would be doing it in mixed groups, again, to that idea of belonging and community. If you're working alongside your older peers, there is something really, really special and magical in that. But it was about seeing their potential and not seeing the limitations that were placed on them. So if you start to strip back those things and you start to let them fly, then you start to see the potential. And that idea of achieving without limits, performing without limits, believing without limits is really fundamental to who we are.
And so 32 years ago, take us back. What were you, how did you come to join the school? What role were you taking up? You talk about another head.
Yes, so I joined as head of music, and I'd been working in another school in Enfield, and I was quite happy there. And this is a sort of a narrative of my leadership journey. It's always other people who have said to me, have you thought about? And I think this is a really important message actually around leadership. Some people are very driven in terms of where they want to be, but I always say, and I say this to the girls at school as well, though, our job and our responsibility is to lift everybody up around us. We talk about a sisterhood, to look around and pick each other up. And talking about Mrs. Obama, when we went to the White House once, and she had this amazing group of her female aides there to talk to the girls, and they gave this really powerful idea of when you're doing well, you reach behind, you put your hand out behind you and you pull the next people along, and it's not a competition. When one is winning, we're all winning. So it was just I digress there. But so I joined as a head of music, and when I got there, there weren't even desks in the music department. There were barely a couple of keyboards. There was very, very little. And I looked at these group of girls, and I have to say, I thought to myself, oh my goodness me, what have I arrived at? But it didn't take me long. It took me a couple of weeks to realize that this was a phenomenal community. And all they needed was to be given the opportunities, to be given the tools, and they could fly. And it was some of my happiest years was being head of music. We had choirs of 200, we had orchestras, bands. If you provide it, they will come. A fantastic time in my career that was.
Just thinking back to that time, can you think of one kind of story or event that captured some of that transformation that you were part of in lifting the lid within music?
So we had always struggled to engage with our parents. And I think music is one of those things that allows you to do that. The concerts were I loved them. And I remember the deputy head at the time would always say to me, Sarah, how many tickets have you sold? I said, don't worry, it's going to be fun. Because it was always rammed. And I remember one year we were singing the South African national anthem. So why not? And we had the choir who were singing, and we were singing in harmony, but we were singing it just in a 3-part harmony. And a parent was in the audience who was South African, and he stood up as the girls were singing and sang the bass line. And there was this sense of true togetherness as a global community, but coming together in a place where we were all on the same page. And there's multiple times experiences like that where it was a connection. It was a way in which the school was able to touch the community and vice versa, and build those links and build trust in order for us to really start to push the way we wanted to push academically.
That's a beautiful moment to picture. Thank you. And I wonder, has that background in music, as you'll be aware, even more so than us, I'm sure, but is particularly under the cosh at the moment. Has that background kind of given you anything that you you take into leadership that might be different?
Yes, I think there are quite a few examples actually, and not necessarily obvious. I think the old traditional model of who would be in the senior leadership team, you would have your English teachers, your maths teachers, maybe a science teacher to do the timetable. But actually the ability to think creatively is really important, because on any given day as a head teacher, you have no idea what might come across your desk and what you have to be able to think and get your head around. But I would say just as importantly, what's at the core of that is people. So growing up playing music and being in bands and orchestras and choirs, I always wanted and needed that connection with people and feeling part of something bigger than me. That was really, really important. I suppose that goes back to this idea of belonging as well, feeling part of something. And so that ability to pull a community with you to build something that people want to believe in as well, I think is really important. Yeah. So I would say those two things probably.
And I mean that's really interesting to hear. As a musician myself, I I always thoroughly enjoy seeing what it is that heads who are former music teachers bring that is
Mm.
that is unique. I think every different department does seem to bring its kind of own angle. It's really exciting for me seeing those kind of differences and the way that it plays out in pupil impact. Um, and could you just talk me through a little bit of what it was like to host Michelle Obama, and what did she see in your school that resonated with her?
Gosh, so the very first time that she came, I remember that the head, as was, she called me into the office and she said, "I've just had a call from the White House." And we were like, "What's this is unbelievable." But we were all sworn to secrecy. But I remember having to show the Secret Service around, and her team came over in the Secret Service, and they came and they looked around and they said, "Well, we're probably not going to come to EGA because she's probably going to go to the art gallery in Dulwich just round the corner." And I said, "She doesn't want to go there. She wants to come here. Just think of the difference she can make here. Look at these girls, look." They went, "Okay, okay." They went away and they spoke to Mrs. Obama, and she said, "Absolutely, I want to go there," which was amazing. So on the day, we still couldn't tell anybody who was happening. We had to select up to 100 girls to stay. And we just said, "Look, there is a visitor," and everybody else went, and we were on the stage, we had performances ready, and she was quite late, so we were watching, I forget, we were watching Mamma Mia the movie, and the girls were like, "Oh God, this is going on, can we just go?" We were like, "No, you don't, honestly, you don't want to go." And they'd always told us it was going to be a really small event, a private event, but as it turned out, the world's press were at the back of the hall. I mean, there were hundreds, there were snipers on the roof, there was everything going on, it was crazy. And I was standing at the side because I was head of performing arts then, so I was in charge of the show. And every time I sort of got up, all the cameras would start clicking. Amusing. But and then of course I got to say the word. "I'd like to welcome onto the stage the First Lady of the United States, Mrs. Michelle Obama." And the girls, I mean, was something I will never forget. But what is so powerful about that is that it was transformative for us, but it was transformative for her as well. And she was changed by that moment at EGA, and she writes about it, she's written about it multiple times, that she realised at that moment her power and what she was able to do in this role as First Lady. And she has continued to keep in touch with us. She talks a lot about she doesn't want to be one of those people in people's lives just comes and goes and it's just a flash in the pan. And we've taken students over to the White House to meet her. We've met her in Oxford. She's come back and done talks actually at our big belonging conference. She came and spoke in the afternoon and talked about
Wow.
her book was becoming, but it was a sort of narrative. So she is very much a friend of a friend of the school. She keeps in touch. I'm in touch with the Obama Foundation. They are always asking, "What can we do? What can we do? How can we help?"
Sounds brilliant. And so, what was it that kind of, do you think, particularly resonated with Michelle Obama in your school?
I think when she looked out at the girls, she saw herself, she saw her daughters, and she saw all of that potential. And yeah, I think she just recognized her own story in what she was seeing right in front of her, and there is something amazing at that. And then And then having those girls reflect back to her just how much she meant and her words meant. There was a few phrases that she used, which we still talk about now. She said, you are the women that will build the world the way it was meant to be. If you talk to young people and you tell them just how powerful they are, just how much they have got to offer, and you believe that, it's not just words, and you believe that, and then you equip them to do those things, they will rise to that. They will rise. And so, yeah, it was an amazing moment. And she said, I loved it. She said, it's cool to be smart. It's cool to be smart.
A good line. And you mentioned running a kind of belonging event, but I believe you also do belonging workshops. Is that right?
We do. So it was a piece of work that came following the events of George Floyd. So we were all in lockdown at that point. Now our school is predominantly a Black minority. And I was wondering whether or not we had paid enough attention. Just because your school is a majority of young people who are not white, that doesn't mean to say that you can take your eye off the ball. So, and we knew that we weren't there. If we'd have been there in school, we would have been able to help them to make sense of it, to help them to find a way through, to navigate, to be able to think through what was happening. We weren't there. So we knew that when we came back into school in September, when COVID restrictions were lifted, that we had to do something really quite fundamental. And we did a whole 2 days of training with the staff on, it was called See Me, Hear Me, Walk With Me. And it was one of the most moving things I've ever done with the staff. Now, I wanted to do it and I set it up. And actually, I worked with a friend of mine from school, but I didn't lead it because it's not for me to lead. That work is not for me to lead. And it's also about knowing when do I step away. And so I had a team of some of my staff who were phenomenal, and they led that work. And then that was shared with the students, and some phenomenally powerful voices were heard during that experience that really shook us and went, right, okay, yeah, that's really important. I remember, for example, we were sitting with a group of older students and they were talking about one student. She was a student from West Africa and she had quite a long name. And she said, the teacher just can't get my name right. So they shorten it to this. She said, but that's not my name. My name means this. But when you do that, it doesn't mean that. And, just moments like that, where you go, right, okay, stop. We have to be better. We have to continually be better. And then out of that piece of work came this idea of belonging. And that every new Year 7 intake, when they come to the school within the first 2 weeks, one of the first things, because young people, when we arrive in a place, we get a sense of the values of the school by what happens first. And one of the first things we do is this belonging conference. And it's about, workshop. And it's about the Year 7s together exploring what it means to belong. Who are they? Because we want to find out who are they, and then who are we? And then how do we provide what they need? And how do they know right from the very beginning that this is a place where you are valued, where every part of you is important? And it's about narratives. We tell stories, they tell stories, and they start to form that bond. And hopefully they recognise very early on that we see them as more than a statistic. Yes, we want you to get fantastic GCSE results, absolutely, because I know that can change lives, but it's more than that. I want to know all of them.
Sounds wonderful. I want to come to one of your belonging workshops. And with these kind of initiatives that you're rolling out, how do you? I kind of almost don't want to ask this question because it's one of those those things we're kind of always asked to do in schools. But I just wonder how do you track the impact of something like a belonging workshop? How do you look at that over the bigger picture?
Yeah, it is an interesting question, and we've been talking about this a lot in the senior leadership team about how do you know that what we're setting out to do is making a difference. So I suppose you need to be really clear about why you're doing it. What actually are you trying to achieve? So you can have a look at, for instance, things like attitudes to learning. You can have a look at behavior points. You can have a look at some of that data that comes. You can do some tracking of those things. But those are quite blunt tools, really. So we do a lot for student voice, a lot. But what it allows you to do quite quickly is to pick up those children who a workshop's not going to change that, because fundamentally they are layers and layers of things that are within you, of your experiences that you've had up until the moment that you come to us, that are going to need a lot of attention and care. And then we have much more bespoke programs and things that we do with those young people. So how do we track? I think it's by you ask the students the right questions, and then we build up huge amounts of objective and subjective data, things that we hold that give us patterns. And of course, each cohort that comes in are different. And so you can't just replicate. One of the reasons why we do that right at the beginning is also to what's underneath the skin of this group of young people? What is going to be different about what they need? It's an interesting one. Is just because you can't measure something, it doesn't mean it's not happening. And sometimes you can tie yourself up in knots to say, well, I have to be able to measure the impact of this in order to justify doing it. Neither of those two are helpful, but equally, there's no point continuing on doing something if it's not going to make a difference. So it's always, it's asking the students, giving really, sometimes that will be all of them. They will all do a survey at the end of that workshop about, their experience. But it would also be smaller focus groups. And recently, we've been working very hard with our pupil premium students. We know that the pupil premium gap for those disadvantaged students, which before COVID had really started to narrow, and for us, our pupil premium students were making more progress than students nationally, all students nationally. But like everybody, that gap is widening. And so we were doing some work, particularly some student voice with our pupil premium students. And it was fascinating because when they were talking about school and themselves and how it felt, it was really upsetting because their view of their experience, even though some of these students were doing fantastically well, top set maths, massive achievement points, they couldn't see it, but they couldn't see it yet. And we were like, wow, this is really interesting. Let's replicate and do that with our non-pupil premium students, exactly the same questions. And some of those students who are not doing as well as their counterparts loved it. Yes, I know what I'm going to do. It's brilliant. I love school. The teacher helps me. This is happening. And we were like, wow, this disconnect. And it's how do you keep on trying to work out what that group needs? And it's not as simple as extra maths, extra English, extra this, extra that. It's far more deep rooted. Now, I would say that student voice tells us that the longer they're with us, the more we can start to address that. But that was a year in, and it reminded us of the work that still needs to be done.
I did want to talk a little bit more about the insights you have with such a high proportion of pupil premium children. And you mentioned that you're around 60% pupil premium in your school. Do you know what the national average is for?
I think it's about 23%. Don't quote me on that, but it's significantly higher.
And so probably almost 3 times the norm. And you're clearly doing something right as a school to be flourishing as you are.
Yeah.
Yet you discovered something that wasn't working. And I wondered if you could tell me more about that.
Yes, so pupil voice, as I've said previously, is really important. If you want to know, ask the question, and sometimes be prepared to hear with brutal honesty what you may not want to hear. So our current year 7s are, we thought, really well settled and really doing well. But we knew that higher up the school, our stubborn pupil premium gap was still there. So we wanted to really think about the younger students as they were coming in and to really test how they were feeling before it got to the point where it was harder to do something about it. We did a pupil premium review and we got a group of just pupil premium students together, and we asked somebody that the students didn't know, and they were on their own without a member of staff. And there was a series of questions that the girls were asked about their experiences of school. The group was really varied. Some of them were doing really well, some of them weren't doing so well, some of them were some of the highest achievers within the school, a real mixture of girls. And when the person who was conducting the interviews came out, she said, goodness me. They had a lot to say, and they had a lot of things that they were concerned about. They were talking about teachers not supporting them, or, not feeling that they were achieving as much as they wanted to do, focus on how they were behaving. Really, really surprising us. And we were like, this doesn't sound like our school. This is really interesting. She then went and spoke to a group of older students, and she said, I've just been speaking to some of the younger students, and they were telling us this, and this other group said, no. If they're being told off, it's just because they're naughty. So she was like, this is really interesting. So we thought, okay, but this is how they feel.
Yeah.
So we cannot minimize it. We can't ignore it. It was a shock to us, and we were really taken aback because of all the things that we pride ourselves in. So we got a group of all non-pupil premium students and asked them exactly the same questions, again with somebody that they didn't know. And what those students said was completely different. The teachers really helped me. I feel really confident. I've got good friends. I know what I'm going to do in the future, and the school's helping me to get there. And it was like talking about two completely different schools. Now, interestingly, when we went back to some of those pupil premium students and said, can we talk to you a little bit about this? Because we know we want school to be great. And they were like, oh, no, it's great. I love it. But there is something in some of those students where their daily experiences are hard and their relationships and sometimes their families' relationships with systems and authority are fractured and fractious. And there is just this lack of trust. And also, what really upsets me is this lack of belief in themselves and what they're capable of going on to achieve. So when we were asking the pupil premium students, what do you want to do in the future? I don't know, I haven't thought about it. And so it really woke us up to how do we adapt our work even further. This year we introduced a pupil premium scholars program. So just for our pupil premium high achieving students to really make sure that those young people can excel at the top end. But it's about everybody's experience, and we can never do anything for one group that we're not able to find ways in with others. So we're doing a lot of thinking about those students and how we can help to really solidify their relationship and their trust in us, for them to be able to really, one, flourish, but also enjoy their experience at school and know that they really, they really do. They are in a place where if they can let go a little bit and trust, that they're able to really fly.
And you've kind of mentioned previously, I know that that actually some of these children were achieving really highly, yet feeling unseen.
Yeah.
And I was wondering if you could unpack that for me, help me understand how that happened.
Well, you can tell somebody over and over again, you're great. But if you're not ready to receive it, because communication is a two-way street, isn't it? Because actually there's a whole history of other things that you have been experiencing that are suggesting otherwise, then those words don't go in. And that's what I think we hadn't realized. So there were girls, we do stars, so for achievement points. So there was this girl sitting there with her bronze, silver, gold, platinum, way down with her badges of success, but yet saying, I don't feel that I'm, my teachers value the work that I do. So there is something else clearly going on there. And, I do have some sort of sense of some of those girls' experiences and some of the challenges day to day that they experience. And school is part of their experience, isn't it? But there's a whole lot more that happens to them that builds that sense of who they are and that sense of self. So we will be working very, very hard to try and find ways in with those young people. And I think a lot of that is about building ambition and aspiration right from the very beginning. It doesn't really matter whether or not that ambition is what you end up doing. If you want to be an astronaut, be an astronaut. If you don't end up being an astronaut, it doesn't matter, but just dream big, have a plan, have an ambition, drive for it, because that teaches you all sorts of skills, doesn't it? But you're likely, like all of us, to weave in and out. So I think there's a lot of work that we need to do with them right from the very beginning about how they see themselves, how others see them. So like always, we'll be tweaking some of the things that we do and paying more attention to that right from the very beginning. And we'll be tracking that group of students as we go through as well.
Thank you. And so after a discovery like this, that a child could be being, in one sense, valued by your staff and yet still feel unseen, what do you do after that? How do you change? What changes do you make after a discovery like that?
Well, this was all quite late on in the summer term. So I think for us, it will be, for some of those students who will be confident to articulate, I would want to have a conversation, not me, because that feels too heavy, but somebody to sit down and really unpick what that means for them and why. Why does it feel that way for you? And then ask the question, what do you need from us? Because we are doing all of these things, but if that's not landing, and then that is making your relationship with school not as strong as it could be, what do you need from us to make that even better? So I wouldn't want to presume what we do differently. We are going to be looking differently at our reward systems. That's a piece of work that we're going to be doing this year. And I think that the student voice in understanding that will be really important. So yeah, they need to tell me. They need to tell me, and they may not be able to fully articulate it. But I think for them, just knowing that we heard you, we asked you, you told us, and we've heard you. Now what are we going to do? Now what are we going to do? I think it's powerful.
And even being ready to listen is an amazing affirmation, isn't it? Of that. So there are quite a few challenges you've faced in the circumstance that you find yourself. And I believe one of your approaches to facing some of those challenges was to launch a charitable foundation.
Mhm.
And I was wondering if you could tell us about why and what you're hoping that that achieves.
Yes, so we're just in the process of launching the Elizabeth Garrett Anderson School charity. I know that I can provide these girls with a really strong academic experience. I know that. But what I cannot, with the money that I have, give them all the additionality that I know that is a right for children in other schools. Because for so many of them, they are just not able, their families are not able to contribute to those things. So everything has to be found by us. But there is also it's also those connections. So if I've got a young person that wants to be a doctor, for the majority of them, they've got no idea. They've got no content. They've got no links. They've got no family ties. They haven't got a friend who can take them to go and do a bit of work experience. Everything has to be created by us. And we have so much work to do to make sure that the potential of these young people is really exploited to get them to where they need to be. That I need to find other ways in which to do that. So we've taken that decision that, yeah, we need to set this up. I know that these are young women who can go on to be game changers, who can go on to be phenomenal citizens in the future. And I need to do everything I can to make sure that I get them there. And they don't have the luxury of sitting around the dinner table at night talking about, I want to be an author and somebody knows somebody who knows somebody. We have to find that for them. So yeah, we're launching the charity. We're really excited, and it is particularly around addressing the inequalities for pupil premium students. And so I was talking to you before about we have this pupil premium scholars program. Well, I don't want it to be just for my high achieving students. I want to be able to do some of these things for every single child. If we have this ambition, which is to achieve without limits, the limitations that are on us at the moment are financial. That's the reality of the situation that we're in. Those pupil premium scholars who this year went to Oxford University and it blew their mind and has changed every way that they think about themselves and what they're able to do. I need to be able to have those resources to be able to find those experiences for every child in the school. So yeah, we're really passionate about this.
And so just then you've mentioned the kind of financial pressures that you're under. One of the things I know you're kind of really keen to be true is that, in particular with innovation and technology, you want to stay true to what's working, but you also want to increase you want to increase teacher capacity
Yeah.
rather than just have tools which reduce workload. And yeah, I'd love you to unpack what you mean by that.
So for me, yeah, it's not about let's find ways in which we can reduce teacher workload. It's about how can we make sure that teachers are doing the things that are going to make a difference in the classroom to young people. And too much of the time, what we're doing is just it's just time heavy, and teachers are time poor. And if we can find ways in which we can free up teacher time to allow them to do the things that are going to make a difference. For me, it's capacity building, and that's what's exciting. With a startup, somebody that we knew was a colleague of somebody else, and what's exciting about that piece of work is that he is growing it from the ground up and he is growing it with us. So we can talk to him and say, this is a challenge for us. Can you build something around? Can you create something so that we're able to really respond in ways that make a difference for us? I think it can be quite overwhelming when you start to have a look at, all of the different products and systems and things that are out there. But I think growing and starting small with somebody who is aligned with the values, who understands the school, who builds a strong relationship with the teachers, that we can then help to grow something in ways that will, build capacity for our staff to spend more time doing meaningful things with young people.
And with so many tools and platforms and everyone promising to reduce teacher workload and increase impact and et cetera, why would you go for working with a startup rather than working with one of those established brands?
Well, I think that you can meet somebody, you can have a conversation with them, you can build a relationship with them, that that their motivations are aligned with yours. That's really important to us. And that that person is in your school, understands your processes, is not trying to impose something that's already implanting it on the top. is interested in building something that aligns with what you already have but enhances. So for me, I just have real trust in this person that they are able to respond. And I think it's quite exciting to be in at the start of something. You know, if we have an idea, he can build it. And that's quite exciting. And I don't think you'd have that if you were working with a larger organization.
What are you hoping to achieve from this partnership with this startup?
So at the moment we've started quite small, and we're just looking at ways in which that we can house the curriculum in one place, and it can be readily accessible for students, for staff, for parents, for governors, without duplicating work, and it's all live. So that's very, very simple, because if you think about the things that teachers do, they'll write this and then you upload it on the website, then you make a change here and it's out of date, and then somebody's come. It's just all of those little things that actually, if you have a live portal where you make your changes, and it came from parents. One of the parent survey questions that always scored lower were, how can I help my child more at home? I want to know what's going on. So, we thought, okay, well, let's work out how we address that. So that's the starting point. But then there's some interesting pilot work that we're doing around marking. So marking is something that takes huge amount of teacher time, and is really important in terms of providing good feedback to young people, but can be really onerous and time hungry. So we're working with him, and one of our teachers is piloting some of the software that he's developing around giving, and it has to be better feedback. It has to be better feedback. It cannot ever be compromised in terms of quality, but reduce time. So that's a piece of work that we'll be pursuing this year.
And I think one of the things that would be interesting for me, in one sense, you're kind of focusing on that incremental change through technology, which is definitely something as a tech CEO I can be on board with. The idea of progress by iteration, it's fantastic. I guess I want to ask a bit more of a question about dreaming for schools and tech. So, if you could wave a magic wand and have a piece of software built specifically to help your school achieve its goals, something that doesn't exist yet, what would it do?
You've asked me a question that I don't know the answer to. That is something that I would have to give thought to, Ross. I don't want to just give you a glib answer. I know for my staff, one of the things that they find really challenging is marking of endless exam papers, which it takes huge amounts of time, but is really important. So something that could give you some analysis of cohort level and student level outcomes. That is something which is a real friction point between school and what the school needs and what teachers say is really challenging for them. Anything that produces live information, so live data, anything that is just absolutely current, that you don't have to, I'm a bit of a Luddite here, you'll realise this as we go on, that you don't have to put it into this system, upload it, and then you get current. That's something that is always uploading and live. I mean, we were hoping that our MAS would be able to do that, but it doesn't. So you're constantly feeling like having to plug things in and then upload and then find it. And then, so anything that just makes everything just as it is now, because we hold so much data on young people, so much. And there is no point in holding data if you don't use it. And people don't feel that confident to use it if it hasn't got validity, and it goes out of date the minute you submit it. So it has to be live. So there you go. That's what I would say. Anything that finds a way in which we can have data which is continually refreshed and continually as up to date as it can be.
And I mean, one of the things you kind of alluded to there is this time spent moving data between systems or between silos. And I'm trying to remember what the stat is. It's something pretty incredible. It's something like 15 hours a week now is the average time spent by a teacher in duplicating data between systems.
Yeah.
Is that something you can identify with?
Absolutely. And that was one of my reservations about bringing in a new platform, because before we did that, we had done a piece of work to streamline what we were working on. And so we changed our MIS, but unfortunately, the MIS does not provide the quality of data in the same way that we want to use it. So that is a challenge. So you're always sort of working across multiple platforms that don't always talk to each other, because some systems, I think, make it harder to talk to other systems to try and nudge you into working with them. And then, you end up with things in different places. The ideal would be one centralized place that would do everything in the way that you would want it to be. So you're not continually asking this to talk to this, and then the sync doesn't work to get it to here, and then
Thank you, Sarah. That has been fascinating to hear about the amazing work you're doing at Elizabeth Garrett Anderson School, and in particular, I think what I've taken away is the way that outstanding achievement and deep inclusion aren't just kind of parallel compatibility. They're these inseparable principles that need to be running through school life. And for you listening, if today's conversation about building belonging while maintaining excellence sparked ideas for your school, I'd love to hear them. And you can find more episodes wherever you get your podcasts. And of course, if you know a school leader achieving the impossible, please do send them my way. And until next time, lead well.